Thank you. Thanks, Maggie. Maggie's group does incredible work. We did a benefit for them the other night. $586. Yay! I'm going to start by doing a brief reading because I'm an author and shit now and I'm supposed to do that sort of thing. And I want to set up how this 19-year ordeal began for me. It starts with a record review. That's what I do. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving 2000, in response to my review of TP2.com, I got this fax. This is a copy. The original has long since disintegrated. When I talk to my students, some of whom are here today, they don't even know what a fax was. And it said, you compared Robert to Marvin Gaye. Marvin had his problems. They were nothing like Robert's problem, and this goes back many years, is young girls. This fax, which I'm going to have Maggie pass around, it's hard for me to believe that this even existed. That fax mentions a lot of things that we reported on December 21, 2000. But in particular, there was a lawsuit filed by a young woman named Tiffany Hawkins, incredibly brave girl, the first to try to stop R. Kelly in 1996 for sexual contact that he initiated with her when she was 15 in 1991. It lasted for 3 years, and then she tried to kill herself. This is how the book starts with a record review, and this is how it ends. When Tiffany Hawkins asked her lawyer, Ian Alexander, to contact the Illinois State's attorney on her behalf in 1996, the office chose not to pursue charges against the Chicago superstar based on the word of a girl who met him in her high school choir class. Alexander then filed a civil claim for Tiffany, the first to accuse the superstar of underage sex. Tiffany was the first girl to try to stop him on Christmas Eve, 1996. If her name hadn't been in a single anonymous fax that arrived after I wrote a record review, I'm not sure Abden Palish and I would ever have started our investigative reporting, or that I'd have been motivated to continue what became a very long journey. Adopting the language of another literary journalism hero, Randy Shilts, I always considered Tiffany patient zero in this story. Abden had copied 3 pages from the Kenwood Academy yearbooks during Tiffany's time there, and for almost 2 decades, I kept her photos in a folder on my desk to remind me what this story was really about. In mid-January 2019, Alexander still felt ethically bound by attorney-client confidentiality, but he didn't object when the client he'd represented 23 years earlier asked him to set up a meeting with a reporter. After Tiffany hugged her lawyer, she smiled and hugged me. I didn't know how to react. On December 21, 2000, Abden and I put her name in a daily newspaper, reporting what a man 10 years her senior had done to her when she was 15, and noting that she'd taken his money and signed a non-disclosure agreement. That had to be an incredibly difficult day for her. She had never talked about any of it, not when we called or rang her doorbell, and not when television producers working with Bunham Murray and Lifetime dug it all up again and offered her $10,000. They told her they couldn't ethically pay people to appear in their docuseries, but they would pay for her photographs. She declined the offer. They used her photo anyway. Tiffany was not eager to revisit that part of her life. She'd lost a lot, and she'd done things she was ashamed of. She regretted all of it, but she decided it was finally time to talk. Alexander informed her that as her attorney, he had to advise her that telling me what happened to her from 1991 to 1993, or talking about the lawsuit she filed in 1996 and settled in 1998, would break her NDA, placing her in legal jeopardy. Tiffany laughed a quiet, nervous laugh, then smiled wide, a gorgeous smile, flashing bright white teeth. And we talked for the first time for 2.5 hours for the new digital recorder that replaced my old Sony Pressman. It was like a Walkman, but it recorded. I asked if she'd been disappointed the state's attorney declined to pursue criminal charges. I don't think it was disappointment, more like what I expected. I was a young black girl. Who cared? She had quickly squandered the money she got from the settlement. She cashed her check for 2/3 of $250,000 minus costs and immediately went shopping at the mall. The money, I wish I'd done better with it. However, I still have people to this day that believe the story about how he's the reason I live in a decent home, drive a nice car, am able to travel. Not, I just made the decision not to let my past define my future. I made my life what it is now because I wasn't going to let anyone else do that for me. For a long time, no matter what I was doing, if I heard Robert's music or saw him on TV, my stomach would drop. It would be like, I don't know, reliving a nightmare. It was something for a long time that I couldn't get past because his music was everywhere, and every time I had to hear it. For a long time, I could not get away from him. 100 million albums sold, his own and those he crafted for so many other artists. Billions of dollars generated. The voice of a generation, ubiquitous, untouchable. But she finally, slowly began to tune it all out, to mute it. Tiffany not only survived, she thrived. I think, maybe, I don't know, I'm stronger than most. Tiffany gave me another big hug when we got ready to leave. I'd cried, she'd cried. Her attorney had cried, and we'd laughed a few times too, because hell, sometimes you just have to. She'd already told me she doesn't sing anymore. This is a girl from the south side of Chicago who sang behind her best friend, Aaliyah, in Paris, Amsterdam, Rome, London, and toured America. Doesn't sing anymore. I tried later, several years after that, but the passion wasn't there. I thought of one more question as we were trading email addresses and phone numbers and taking iPhone pics. This one didn't come from the journalist, critic, professor, father, or husband. It came from the inner 13-year-old who fell in love with a Velvet Underground song about a life saved by rock and roll, who later did a fanzine called Reasons for Living and who still lives to listen. After all the evidence I've compiled of damage done and young lives robbed, of all the painful and horrible things I've heard and seen, Tiffany's answer to that question breaks my fucking heart every time I think about it. I know you can't listen to him, I said, but can you find joy in any music now? No, she said, not really, not very much, no. So that's how the book ends. Where are my co-panelists?
All right, well, welcome everyone to the conversation. I'm going to try to dive right in because I know we have a lot of material to go through. We have excellent panelists up here to talk about the topic that, in short, R. Kelly is scum and should have been destroyed 20 years ago, but wasn't. So, and due to the efforts of Jim DeRogatis, who is one of my media mentors, by the way, although he's dropping stuff over there.
Mic drop.
And our MuteRKelly co-founders who have helped to not only Diet Coke is falling over here.
Who have touched that water stuff?
Yeah, that stuff's lethal. Don't go straight for the Diet Coke. At any rate, have worked hard to draw attention to this issue and also go after the one thing that Jim points out in his book, which is excellent, by the way, is that the only thing that really stopped R. Kelly was not the law. It was not an organic fan movement. It really was him running out of money. So to start with that, yes, and I mentioned that. So you were busy with the Coke when I said that. Okay. So he's supposedly out of money. The venues, they don't want to book him anymore because they know that there can be outcry and he doesn't have these celebrity friends that he can fall back on. Why is this book and this conversation still important at this moment?
Well, I think that we find ourselves right now in a moment where it took so many people over decades and decades and decades of work to get us to a point where we're even able to have this conversation on the national and international stage about what somebody's been doing behind closed doors in our community forever. You know, it took Jim 20 years of investigative reporting on this. It took lots of other activists years and years of trying to boycott concerts and get public awareness out there. It took many, many victims coming forward trying to file lawsuits. You know, it took us finally saying, you know, let's use social media and stuff to try to get this together. It took Time's Up and Me Too to change the conversation around sexual abuse and power, for us to even be able to have a vocabulary right now to talk about this in a way more complex than those girls are fast and we're trying to take down a black man, you know? So it took so much coming together for us to even be right here. So I think that it's super important, especially with Jim's book, that you see how long this is. So many people kind of say, y'all popped up and it happened like this, and it's like, no, you know, if it weren't for Jim's work over 20 years, Kenyette and I wouldn't have had the receipts to show people, like, look, no, this is what we're talking about. You know, if it hadn't been for those victims, time after time after time after time, coming forward, even knowing the backlash that they were going to receive, we wouldn't have, you know, the evidence that we have now to say this is an epidemic problem in the community, not just with him. It's going on, you know, in lots of different arenas, as we can see from, you know, Me Too. This is happening nationwide to women of all stature, all throughout society, and we've got to take a stand for it. So, I mean, it's really important that we're having this conversation, particularly about R. Kelly, because unfortunately Black and brown women don't often get the kind of national and international platform to talk about the problems that we're having in our community. So it's really important now that we've been able to get it to this point. And it took so many people to do it, and we're still not at the finish line, so we have to keep this conversation going.
And Jim, in your book, there are some things that you uncover. Like, we've seen the documentary, we've read your coverage over the years. What would you say if you could give at least one aspect of the book that people may not know, like something that's in there that hasn't been previously covered? Because there was so much.
Yeah, there is a lot. There's a lot. I think it's the chronic systemic failure of this city that I love and that I also hate. The court system, Judge Vincent gone, throwing that case. The churches, Reverend Jackson and Reverend Meeks turning a deaf eye and championing this guy and taking his money. The civil attorneys, Susan Loggins, selling those girls out and taking her third of their settlements, using that tool Harvey Weinstein used. Journalism. Fuck the Chicago Tribune. Where were they on this story? I mean, you know, it's me and Abden Palish doing our regular 8 hours a day and then working 10 hours more. And the Chicago Tribune always had 6 reporters to our 1 at the Sun-Times. And rock criticism failing, which kills me. Everybody failed. And the number of interviews, they're still failing. The number of interviews that end with me saying, and this gets cut out, why are you interviewing me? Why don't you talk to some of these black women? Take a walk on the west side or south side of Chicago, and 2 out of 3 women you're going to meet are going to have stories about him cruising Kenwood or Whitney Young, the Evergreen Plaza shopping mall, the Rock and Roll McDonald's. Why don't you go interview some black women? It's time for me to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, no. We need you to keep talking. And
You're going to tell me, though, when it is time. All right, okay. Yes!
Well, it's time right now because I need Kenyette to answer a question for me. One thing that R. Kelly said that really struck me, and I'm sure others, is only God can mute R. Kelly. And I'd like to get your reaction to that. Is that the case? Is that the only a higher power can silence him?
I think the narcissism in me would be like, yeah, you're right, but I'm not God. But I guess what I would say... once again, it just speaks to the level of cockiness and this idea that no one's going to touch me. I've been doing this for so long. So 2 little black girls from Atlanta going to stop me? Okay. Yeah, we did. And I guess for me, what I would say to Robert Kelly is, you know, it became clear to me that we had the power in this movement when I'm sitting in my living room on the phone with Interpol. that to me was, this is real. You know, when I'm speaking to someone who is bilingual in German and English about this work, you're damn right, we did something. So yeah, God didn't stop him, but maybe God gave us the tools and the strategy to stop him.
Well, thank you, God. And I have to say, I'm a little embarrassed that Chicago fans didn't stop him. I mean, I think what you did was absolutely brilliant, but it seems like this is the last bastion of R. Kelly. Like, this is the last place. I got into an argument at a Bronzeville-based coffee shop called Sip and Savor with a woman who was angry that one of his concerts got canceled and wanted her money back immediately, and turned to me like, you see what I'm saying? I was like, no, I have absolutely no idea what you're saying. Why do you think, and anyone can address this, why was Chicago like holding on so hard? And how did you kind of lessen that grip on him as this homegrown legend who loves his mother and hangs out at rock and roll McDonald's? Like, how do you do that and dismantle that kind of legacy?
Well, you know, I'll say, since I'm from Atlanta, and Atlanta is a musical city, and we have all of our homegrown stars, everybody loves a hometown hero. Everybody loves a hometown success story. Everybody can relate to somebody coming from your neighborhood who grew up with your hard times, making a way out of no way. And we want to hold on to that story, even when it shows itself to be false. We want to hold on to that story. So, you know, I don't necessarily fault people who have that kind of emotional tie to an artist, because they're all of us have an artist that, you know, we feel that way about. You know, I tell people all the time, if Don Cheadle walks in here at any moment, I'm gonna see y'all later, I'm out. You know what I mean? We all have
If Hill
somebody
Harper
who,
walks in here, he's my man.
You know what I mean? So I understand that. And I think it's hardest to root that out of your hometown crowd, you know. But again, like, you know, Jim was saying, Chicago has all the receipts. I have never met anybody from the south side of Chicago around my age group who does not have an R. Kelly story, and I live in Atlanta. Like, I have never met anybody who does not have a story about what he was doing. So everybody knew. So it became harder and harder as we keep putting that mirror up to Chicago's face for them to keep denying what they were seeing back. And so it takes that showing people themselves over and over and over again and making the connections with how they're complicit in this behavior to get people to really kind of think about it in a more critical way. So I think one of our biggest successes was working with activists here to get the Chicago concert shut down. Because of all the concerts, I thought there's no way.
Right.
Chicago's
I think it was on Mother's
canceled.
Day of all things.
Yeah.
It was
Like,
on
are you out of
Mother's
your
Day.
mind?
Yeah,
Right.
it was
At a university venue, I believe.
yeah.
Like, I mean, it was just all wrong in every way. So
It was wrong.
Right.
And I want to give a shout out to one of the organizers who made that happen. If she's here in the house, Darletta Scruggs, who is the MuteRKelly Chicago organizer. I think she was stuck in traffic. So if she's not here when she comes, I would love to definitely acknowledge her.
yeah, but that was a very big deal because I know, you know, I'm in Atlanta. I know our, you know, our Goody Moms, our Outcasts, our, you know, all that kind of stuff. We are die hard. You can't say nothing about them. So I understand that impulse. But having Chicago shut the concert down here was like,
And, you know, it's not my place to say. I'm obviously not black, all right?
Say what?
But if Oprah had said one word at any point, if Reverend Jackson or even Reverend Flager, Father Flager, ain't no camera he's ever said no to, right? If Jordan, you know, does Space Jam with him, I mean, everybody knew. And that Chicago, you know, this damn city with its segregation and its racism, the South and West Sides might as well be a different city, you know. And I understand in particular that hometown pride of this guy who rises from the street, singing for change to become what he became, you know. But I don't think it was that. That is true of the streets, but in the black power base, such as it is in Chicago, you know, it was money. It was money. Everything was money.
I would say it was money, and it was also just apathy. And when you talk about issues of racism and that intersectionality in the Black community, it's race first, always. You don't, and there's narratives around, respectability politics and victim blaming. Well, why were you in this grown
Right.
man's face? Why were you out at this time of night? If you know those boys are like that, why were you with them? And we have created narratives to actually forgive predators in the Black community because we don't view sexual violence as a real crime in the Black community.
Absolutely.
I will say it. I will say it again. I will get spammed on my Twitter. I'm probably getting spammed on Twitter now as we're speaking. I might get yelled at the airport, but I'm going to say it again. We have a pathological apathy regarding sexual violence in the Black community, and that is the reason why I believe Robert Kelly has been able to do this shit for so long, because we just don't care.
Absolutely.
We just don't care.
Absolutely.
Because that's what I was going to ask you about the prisms of there's racism, there's sexism, there's celebrity, there's classism. There's so many isms here, and for you, it is that apathy.
And one other, I think as a music critic, I was uniquely positioned to do this. I mean, I had been an investigative reporter, but I understood the music world. I mean, almost all of these 48 women whose names I know wanted to be singers, right? And they loved the music, and they appreciated his music, and there was the money, the fame, all that other stuff, but he was going to make them Aaliyah. And, to use that, to take that and pervert that on top of everything else. And also, it was just, Abden and I are as white as two white guys got. And I'm pretty white. That's why I got the ink.
You're
so
transparent.
I have some color.
You're pretty white, yeah.
We're ringing these doorbells, and, we're getting invited into people's homes, and they're making us tea, and they're telling us these stories and saying, thank you for listening. But for me, the thing that always broke down is, you were playing Staples. I interviewed Mavis. Mavis is the great. And suddenly
Right.
we're cousins, right? We're
Got it.
brothers. It's like I understood that. And somebody, a key source early on said, I'm going to talk to you because you understand music.
So it's kind of a tangential
there.
connection. But what about that? I mean, you say in the book that you said to these people, I know we're not necessarily part of your community, but we're here to listen. I think when we're talking about apathy, we also can't ignore the fact of the blinding whiteness of newsrooms at the time that this story could have broken. What role do you think the whiteness of these newsrooms and the lack of diversity and the lack of maybe knowledge and understanding of different communities in Chicago played in the way that this story was treated, or rather not treated?
The Sun-Times got over it quick. Damon Dunn, the attorney who read every word we ever printed, who read this book and vetted this book, said, I have no idea who R. Kelly is. And he did 20 minutes of research. I mean, this is 2000, right?
Pre-Google.
In 2000.
Pre-Google, pre-Twitter.
And realized, exactly who
I
he
was about to stage a protest, like right here.
And our city editor, and Abden, was so clueless. He said, I had said he's the biggest star in Chicago since Curtis Mayfield, and Abden said, who was Curtis Mayfield?
What? No.
I gave him the box set at the Hideout on Saturday. He did. He was all about Irish folk rock, and that was it. But when I was encouraging you and publishing you in the Sun-Times, it wasn't because you were a fine young Black journalist. It's because you're a good goddamn motherfucking journalist.
Thank you.
Period.
He did. He hooked me up, guys. Please give him some applause. I wouldn't be
just
up
didn't-
here if it wasn't for Jim.
I didn't see the difference between these victims and my daughter. I just never did. And the Sun-Times got to that position soon, quickly, and the Tribune never did to this day. Never one investigative story in 20 years.
But also, to be fair, one of the first things that I did when we started this campaign was to reach out to Black media, especially in Atlanta, which is, big, lots of music media, lots
Right.
of,
Entertainment and culture.
Exactly. And their reaction was also very much like, we're not interested in this story. We do not want to have any part of seeming to take a black man down.
Right.
Nobody wants to talk about these fast girls and their money-grabbing antics. One conversation in particular, I remember I was in my office and I had to step out into the hall to take the call because I finally got someone from the radio to call me back about stopping his, playing his music on the radio. And I talked to this person for an hour, and we went through the evidence, we went through the long history of what we know about him, we went through Black radio's historic position as being progressive and political. We went through all of this, and at the end of it, he said, yes, all of that is true. However, we don't really care about it, and people want to hear his music, so we're going to play it. And so I said, okay, so to recap, like just so that I'm clear, we all know him to be a sexual predator in our community. The vast majority of your listenership are Black women, 60% of whom have been sexually assaulted before they're 18. So you are playing a sexual predator to women who are victims of sexual predation. We went through the whole thing, but you do not care because people want to play him. And he hasn't had a hit song in forever
and let's
now.
point out that in those songs, I will say this, Jim points out that the lyrics and the themes are almost mocking of what he has been accused of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we went through all that stuff, but you are not going to stop playing him on the radio. And he said, correct. And when we got off the phone, I bawled. I mean, I just bawled because it was really like, who cares about Black girls? And what do we have to do to make us important enough that you will take a has-been artist off the radio? We're not talking about Beyonce today. I'm not asking you to stop playing Rihanna. Right. You know, we're talking about songs that are 20 years old now, and you won't stop playing those because nobody cares. I mean, essentially.
And I want to kind of double on that because that was a really dark time in this campaign, and I think that was one of the times where I had to say, all right, Kenyette, you got to find a way to keep going, because as she was dealing with that, I was dealing with the Fulton County Board of Commissioners who were trying to find every way to say that this is not their responsibility, until I decided to show up at a public hearing when everyone was talking about the new tax system and walk up on the mic and say, hi, I represent MuteRKelly. And no one knew what the hell MuteRKelly was. And within 3 hours, we got an email from the chairman of the Board of Commissioners, and the entire Board of Commissioners voted unanimously in support of MuteRKelly and approached Live Nation to cancel the concert. So it was really...
And Live Nation didn't want to.
They did not want to. We got and it's interesting how this kind of how we fed off of each other, because it was really that experience that she was having that was like, oh no, hell with this. It's like, okay, if the radios aren't listening, the politicians will listen. And I also think that's kind of the strength of the two of us, is that our skill bases are so diametrically opposed, but they both fit in this space, and we were able to maximize what we do well separately together, and I think that's really the beauty of this campaign.
Can I just insert, we are 1.5 miles from Trump Tower, which rose where the Sun-Times stood. And right now, there is a 19 and 22-year-old girl there. They have not seen their parents in 3 years. Their parents used words that at first I thought were sensationalistic and could not be true. Brainwashed and cult, and 15 sources later and a mountain of documentary evidence, right? And where the fuck is the Cook County Sheriff's sex trafficking office? They put out a press release every 3 days crowing about how they shut down Craigslist, right? And good for them. Why aren't they ringing that doorbell every hour on the hour? Because I reported what Dominique Gardner said. It's in the book. She was with him 9 years. And I loved him and he loved me, Jim. And when it was great, it was great. And yeah, he beat me with an extension cord. And yeah, he choked me. And yeah, he starved me. And yeah, he tried to break me. But I loved him and he loved me. If those are your daughters, their names are Joy Savage and Azriel Clary, why is he still with them now? You know, he's indicted, well and good. He's subject of a grand jury from the feds, well and good. But right now, what is Joy and Azriel? What is happening to them?
I think one interesting point is that we have on the stage the two groups that have been most accused of trying to take down the black man. Sadly enough, that's a white man and black women. Right. And you know, what do you think is behind that? You know, like, we are living now in the year 2019, coming up on 2020. What is behind the taking down of a black man? You know, even if you have proof that they're taking down black women, as Jim just pointed out, that this is still going on.
Well, it comes down to what I mentioned before, just how we look at intersectional oppression. And in the black community, especially in Chicago, and you mentioned the segregation in Chicago. I grew up in Shaker Heights, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cleveland. And Cleveland is very segregated. If you've ever been there, it is east and west, and it is segregated by race. And I grew up thinking that that's just the way it was. So in the east side of Cleveland, including the suburbs, you protected your race. That was what you had to protect because it was the white man, the white systems, the criminal justice system that was designed to take you down. So fast forward to MuteRKelly and why this is so problematic is because, once again, when we think about intersectional oppression and sexual violence in the black community, it's almost like, hey, you got yourself raped, you got yourself molested, and if you would not have done that, this would have happened to you. And oh yeah, it was bad, but you know what, get over it. Take it to the grave. You know, why are you allowing it to have space in your head? Or worse, he's sick. What did you expect? He was molested. So therefore now, we need to pray for him and not, you know, hold him accountable. And you know, my sister, Aisha Simmons, who did the No documentary, if you've ever watched it, watch it. If you haven't, I guarantee you'll understand sexual violence in the black community more. But she used the term love with accountability. And that's really how I approach this space. I am a mother of 2 beautiful black sons. They are amazing humans. I love them. I understand their risk navigating this world, especially with white supremacy as being black and male. I also have a black daughter, and I understand that she too shares that risk in addition to the intersectional sexual violence within her community. And I'll take it a step further. I have a black queer daughter. So now you have another level. And I think we have to be able to have these intersectional conversations and say, hey, yeah, I might be oppressed, but I can oppress someone else. And my oppression against them is just as devastating as the oppression against me. And I think that's kind of the intersection we're at right now.
And speaking of intersectionality, I know this is always a popular topic. You know, we have women that are currently under his thrall, being abused by him. Where are the white feminists that, you know, speak up for NXIVM, and where are they?
There's some in the crowd.
Okay.
Our Music, Our Body,
Right.
Resilience just honored these women
say
last
Resilience
week.
Right.
You know, there were radio, you know, Patty Martin's radio program. I mean, there
But
are
from a
people-
macro level, I mean, I just,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of just as we can point out where some black women
But we
have
also
not
have
embraced,
we also have
to talk about what's
a black
missing.
queer woman mayor now. And where is the city council resolution like they got in
To
Atlanta?
ban him.
You know, or just to say.
Philadelphia, it was
you-
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
In Detroit.
Yeah.
Atlanta
And-
hasn't given us shit.
Yeah.
They want us to go away.
Yeah, that's true.
But you know, I would echo.
That concert got shut down.
Yeah.
No.
No, not Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta
Oh, no.
happened.
That was the
Atlanta
first
happened.
protest.
Yeah, all right.
Because Live Nation.
Your batting average is good though. 13 out of 15 or 15 out of 17.
It
right?
was, yeah.
We're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
But I would say that, to Jim's point, we have actually gotten a lot of white female allyship in this. And a lot of, especially after the Lifetime documentary, a lot of the support that we got was from white feminist allies, in addition to, you know, black feminist allies as well. So I would not necessarily say that they're not showing up to help with this. A lot of the interviews that we do, you know, are from, you know, white feminist journalists, you know, reporters who are stepping up to do this interview. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's easier for them because they're not privy to all of the kind of complexities on the inside of this culture. They're not going to get the same kind of backlash that a black female journalist is going to get. You know, a lot of the black community, in addition to everything Kenyette said, we also live by a mantra of don't put your business out in the street.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's very much kind of who we are. The mind your business is something I think you hear as a black child
The mind your
every
business.
day,
Right.
all
Stay
day.
out of grown people's
Stay out of
business.
grown folks'
Right.
business. Mind your business. Don't talk about what happens in this house, out in
right.
the street. You know what I mean? No matter how benign. I mean, you know, I'd say, you know, I was a vegetarian growing up, and a teacher might say something about me being vegetarian. I come back home, and your parents' response is, "What are you talking about? What we eating in this house?"
Oh my goodness.
You know what I mean? Just everything stays
So
in this house.
broccoli is a secret too,
You know what I
right?
mean? So there's a lot of that kind of secrecy ingrained in our culture, and part of it is because we have this constant feeling of being watched and judged for everything that we're doing. How you wear your hair, how you dress, how you
Right.
raise your children. Everything is up against a lens of people looking at you who do not understand, are not empathetic. And so I think that there's a lot of that. So we have a knee-jerk reaction. When we see black person on the news, you have a knee-jerk reaction that they're innocent, they didn't do it, they're being taken down, it's all lies. You know, and so I tell people all the time when they say this about, you know, y'all trying to take R. Kelly down, there is no way for me to take anybody down with their truth. If I list all of the things that Jim has done in his life and that ends his career, I did not do that.
Right.
Those are his actions. So I can't take R. Kelly down by talking about his truth. This is his truth. He did these actions. And if he gets taken down because of them, that's his karma.
So I also want to just add this about the white feminists. So actually, the Women's March actually has, come out in support of MuteRKelly, and the activists that I worked with in Amsterdam and Germany, R. Kelly, Stumsolten, they were all white women, and there were a few that were African German women, but there were white women that were, especially in our European concerts.
Great. Well, we have to work together, obviously,
Absolutely.
to finish the job here. So I'd like to end with this last question because I want to make sure that we have enough time to get questions from the audience. I'd like to know, how can we effectively reframe this conversation to center survivors? You know, we talk a lot about R. Kelly. I know at one point Jim said, I'm not going to write his name another page in this book because it's a very negative, a very traumatic situation. How can this situation be used to help survivors and to get communities talking? Like, I like to think about solutions instead of focusing on what we know is a problem.
I think for me, saying their names, the excerpt you read just breaks my heart. You know, the fact that someone could no longer love music. I mean, music.
Can I give you some? Tiffany Hawkins,
Yep, there you
Patrice
go.
Jones,
There you
Tracy
go, let's do
Sampson,
it.
Kenyette,
Kenyette, I'm a survivor too, not of R. Kelly, but I'm a survivor.
Lizette Martinez, DeLeon Richards,
Dominique
George's
Gardner.
music daughter. Dominique
I just
Gardner,
spoke with her mom
Johanna
today.
Johnson. I mean, for
Yep.
fuck's sake.
Right.
Why are we here? How come they're not here? Because they're not ready yet. And some of them were brave enough to do Surviving R. Kelly. And what I can't believe is the hate being directed to them on social media. You two get it too. I mean, I got a really thick skin. I'm fat. I'm from Jersey. All right? But the hate that you wake up to every day when you pick up the damn iPhone, it is disgusting. It is, to me, the face of those assholes marching in Charlottesville with their Home Depot tiki torches, hating black people and hating Jews. And that's the same hate I see being directed to you and the women who are speaking out. It's despicable.
I mean, there's a whole, Twitter has, unmute R. Kelly.
Yeah.
What?
And and it's like, as a strategist, as someone that does branding, it's like you're still giving us credit when you try to negate and that's a whole lot of letters on a hashtag. People are gonna misspell it, and it's not gonna trend right. So you got that, and we talked about this. I've had in the last year some tragedies that I don't talk about a lot to media, but in May of 2018, I had a total loss house fire. Beautiful 1910 Victorian, and then several, months later, because of all of the carcinogens in the house, my dog that was in the house that was rescued by Atlanta Fire Rescue developed metastatic cancer, and it killed her in a month. So all of that was happening, and Oronike was just, you good girl, you good girl, how you doing, you good? Here's some kale from my garden. And, but you would think that that would invoke a sympathy response, but it didn't.
Oh, no.
So it got to the point where I started my own fire. It was an attempt to commit insurance fraud.
Well, you just wanted to get famous.
I wanted to
on
get
the back
famous,
of this
right?
beloved black man.
So I say all that, and I'll pass the mic to say that, yeah, we've really experienced, like, my children are not on Twitter. I ask them, just stay off. Guys, you don't want this. I've had people, DM me, what if someone accused your oldest son of rape? And I'm like, now I'm going to introduce you to our lawyer. Because we're not going to play this game. Yeah. But there is this vitriol because
this is the amazing thing
it's
to
scary.
me about what you did. The power of social media and that hashtag has united all those women who've been talking to me individually for 20 years, but it has also opened us to
Made a target.
unprecedented waves of hatred.
Right.
And it's, boy, it's a double-edged
And
sword.
so
have
to
one-
kind of
yeah.
circle back to your question, that's why it ends up being hard to center victims in this conversation. It's because you have to you have to have a level of thick skin. You have to be willing to put yourself and every ugly, nasty, shameful, regrettable thing you ever did out there in the public eye. Right now, if I went into the audience and asked somebody how much money they make, they would clam up. Like, we can't even talk about that. But these women have to come and talk about degrading, horrific sexual things that they experience and that they might have then done to other people as a part of this abuse. To put those kind of intimate details of your life in front of everybody is a hard thing to do and is a brave thing to do. And instead of meeting that level of honesty and vulnerability with support and empathy, they're met with hatred and insults. And he talks in the book, Lizette lost her job. This is not something that you stand up and, people are like, oh, they want to get famous. How? Somebody right now, name one of Bill Cosby's accusers.
exactly.
Who gets famous doing this?
Excellent point.
You know what I mean? But in terms of their personal lives, they might have been shredded because of coming forward against such a powerful, person.
Right.
So, it's very hard. We always want to try to make the conversation about what they have been through.
And that's why I hope Kim Foxx takes a back seat to the feds, because Gerhonda and the other women, two of whom are cooperating, are going to get torn to shreds.
Yeah.
And this is Rape Culture 101. Let's get the motherfucker the way we got Capone on his taxes. For fuck's sake, don't put these women through more
through
pain.
this trauma. Okay.
Taxes, not paying
Taxes.
child support. I don't really care.
Right.
Just these girls do not need to have,
Yeah.
these young ladies now do not need to have their lives
Yeah.
ripped apart like that.
Okay. Now we're going to turn to the audience if there are questions. Is there a mic in the front? I think we have a
Yes,
question.
indeed. We've got 2 microphones. If you could please raise your hand, we will come to you and get through as many questions as we can.
It's like the voice of God. Where's that
I
coming
know,
from?
right? I was
Oh, there he goes.
I thought you knew where it
He
was
was
coming from.
far more pro than the radio
Hi there.
pro.
Just picking up on your last comment, can you say a little bit more about the actual federal indictment, what that case looks like, and what the potential defense is going to be?
My 2 sources, who were very chatty for a long time, have not called me back in 2 weeks, which means I think that the grand jury that's sitting is about to move. Right? Is that the best we can say?
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I think I think they're looking at a pattern. They're looking at what's in the book. 30 years of sex trafficking, starting in 1991, of paying people off, obstructing justice, threats. They're looking at tax evasion. They've interviewed everybody in my book. Not everybody has talked to them. Some might be targets. I don't know. I sure would like to go to that press conference and then never write about him again.
We have a question here on the left.
Kim Foxx is really mad at me whenever I say that. But the Illinois
Well,
case is not as strong as the Fed.
she got, you remember in 2017, Gerhonda Pace went to her
Yeah, I mean, they had.
and sat on that shit for how long?
You see, we
I'm
got to have
sorry.
breakfast tomorrow.
We got
But
you
all
You
the-
guys have breakfast.
Right,
Let
I mean,
her question her.
somewhere
She's
in
got
the-
a question for
I
you
know,
guys.
I know.
sorry.
Somewhere in the damn evidence locker is the first
Bruh,
date.
what do you-
What are they doing?
Do you need me to
Just start
stage another
talking. It'll be
protest?
fine. I'll listen to you.
I'm sorry. Oh, hi!
Hi. I really don't have a question. I really just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. I'm not a victim, thankfully, of his, but I went to Kenwood. I was there from 95 to 99. I remember him up there hitting on us. I remember him following us down 53rd Street when McDonald's was there. I remember the contracts and gym shoes he would promise girls and stuff. I have friends he had sex with. We were 15. This is before the Aaliyah video and the videos and all of that, and we kept telling people, he's doing this. I remember the parties out in Olympia Fields at his mansion where everyone had to sign NDAs. And there were adults there facilitating this. We were 15. And we've been talking about this, and I've been telling people, and a lot of us have been saying, hey, he's doing this, he does this, he does this. Even when he came out and started calling himself the Pied Piper, I could not understand how nobody was understanding how this was sick. And the story of the Pied Piper who led the children away to their deaths, like through music. You know, so for so long, so many of us here have known the truth, have talked about it, but because we were black girls and black women, and because sexual abuse has been so normalized in our community, nobody gave a fuck.
Did any of the Kenwood teachers?
Oh, you know, our former music teacher
I
who
know
got
Lena
arrested
McClin,
for
she's in the
sexually
book.
assaulting a child.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no. People
None of the
knew.
none of your teachers.
People knew. People knew. But they were more concerned about, man, can we get him to do a song? Versus these girls are being targeted. It was always, oh, they're fast or they're this. I'm sorry, but if you're a grown man, there's not a girl fast enough if you're not attracted to children who can get you to do anything.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to take up much time, but I just want to say thank you so much, because many of us have been waiting 20 years plus to see this stop, because his behavior hasn't stopped. It's just escalated and gotten better. So thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question here in the back.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Joshua. So Jamila Lemieux actually gave me my, she was one of the first people who gave me my shot as a journalist, and I would just like read some of the stories that she would tell. And that's actually how I got to your work and, you know, eventually reading the book. So I just really wanted to thank you, you know, for, you know, compiling all this stuff. When I was reading the book, I think one thing that really surprisingly grabbed me was just not necessarily the apathy of the people who were like, you know, adversarial to the girls, but the people who were actually helping them. And so like with the attorney, just reading her, like her rationale was more that like they, you know, they just wanted to be, you know, kind of put on, and then when he didn't put on, then, you know, we didn't put them on, then they told. So it was kind of like giving them a certain type of adult agency that felt a little creepy. And then in one of the court cases where they didn't take her name off. And I'm just.
She didn't. Yeah, I mean, they did not redact the name Rashana Landfair when they put out their press release. They had to collect it, and I name her in the book. It was something I wrestled with. I mean, but there's 6 weeks of court testimony. You were in court, Kyra.
Yes,
Her
I
name was
was.
said in court a million times. What are we going to be coy at this point? She's 34 now, you know, and she's still not cooperating. There's a new videotape. I mean, the image that haunts me is one of his assistants in the office said that her mother and father, Greg and Valerie Landfair, would bring her to the recording studio with her pillow and an overnight bag when she was 14 and leave her there for were you there that day, that
Yes,
testimony?
I was. Yeah.
How the jury could have heard that, and then, I mean, they pimped out their daughter.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, when I was reading it, I guess I was just wrestling with all these kind of like different type of social stigmas like intersect. You know, the Georgetown did a study, and it showed that like black girls were considered to be older, they needed less nurturing, that people thought that they knew more about sexual topics than their white counterparts. University.
But we just met her. All right, and did you know any of the girls I wrote about, or Tiffany, or any of the Yeah, the second chapter people. I probably talked to them. Many of them are not named. When I say, yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah. Maybe brother has a problem, brother needs help.
Right.
That's about what you get. No, nobody hates this man because his music touched them.
Last I checked, prison health services also
There you go.
contracts
There
with
you go.
psychiatrists.
There you go.
Whoa.
There you go. I know.
Right.
But yeah, I don't want to. I'll give up the mic. So
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
right.
We have a question here in the back left.
Okay.
Hi, I taught for 30 years in Chicago on the south side when the whole Aaliyah events were happening, and then on the west side when E2 occurred. Remember
Yeah.
that? Where he was giving everybody scooters. We did. Teachers did say something and try to do something. But the Board of Ed and the ineffective DCFS, which continues not to represent our children. Also, as you said, there are parents who comply,
Yeah.
that want to hear I Can Believe I Can Fly at preschool graduations, that still play his music at stepper sets and cookouts and churches. So my question to you, so this complicity is also part of the problem,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
as this young
Yeah.
lady said.
Yeah.
How are you going to come out at a cookout and be like, turn that off, and other people are going to be like, well, we like this song, right?
You
Well, my question
unplug
to
the
you-
music. I've
I'm
done
sorry?
it. You unplug it.
Oh, I do,
That's how
and
you
it
turn-
doesn't look good.
Right.
But my question to you is, has the Board of Ed been held in complicity with this? Because as this young lady said, certain teachers made it much easier for him to meet these young ladies, and certain schools allowed him to be on their grounds. So have you
Yeah.
pursued that
And
at all?
and certain cops worked on his payroll and did security. But you know, to be fair, in this city of cops that have a really big race problem, the white cops of the Special Investigations Unit who were investigating for a year and a half before our first story, they were sickened, they were horrified, they wanted him to stop. And some of them were so scarred that they left the force when he was acquitted, that they quit in disgust, they took their early retirement, and it took me 10 years to get them to talk to me again. And some of them didn't. Right? There were people of conscience, there were people at Kenwood, teachers who would warn. They weren't going to change the system, but they would say, stay clear, say, but, you know, but yeah, but the people in power, no.
And I think that's what, made listening to the audiobook of your book so hard for me, and at times I had to turn it off. It was just the failure at every single level. So it would be, school and police and parents and just everybody, and it would just enrage me so that at every level there was no protection of these girls at all. And so everybody failed. We all failed. And I think that's a big thing. MuteRKelly was not, let's start a campaign to get him to court. It was, let's start a campaign to get the community that was complicit in all this to finally say no more. It was to get all of us to say, we're not gonna play him at the barbecue, we're not gonna play him at our wedding, we're not gonna play him at graduation, we're not gonna buy his concert tickets. We made this monster, and especially the Black community, we made this monster. And so we have a responsibility now to the victims to step up and to undo what we did. And so that's why, I tell people all the time, this is a financial boycott, because we were complicit for years, and we laughed at Dave Chappelle. We all made
Boondocks.
pee jokes. You know what I mean? Everybody knows what you're talking about when you say these things. So we all clearly know what he's doing. And we just kept on supporting him. And so it's our responsibility to then step up and take, and be held accountable for the ways that we failed these young women as well. And so I think, to your point, like so many people did kind of go, hey guys, this is wrong. But if everybody's turning a blind eye, you're just yelling into the void and getting nowhere. And so we were able to create this banner. But then all the people who've been doing this all over were like, finally, yes. Like, let's do this now for real as a group, as a collective, nationwide, worldwide, and let's stop this now.
Well, I want to, do we have time for one more question? Or
I'm
are we-
afraid we are out of time.
We are out of time? Okay, well, I would like to say this. This has been a great discussion. You know, it's just empowering to be on stage and also in the room with all of you, like people that are tired of this. Please read this book. I read it. It is excellent. I mean, it is not a feel-good read at all, but it is a must-read because we can't allow this. He's got some funny stuff
in there,
but
right?
it's not, you know, it'll make you probably won't be able to ever listen to R. Kelly again, which is a good thing. And I want to thank our MuteRKelly co-founders, this beautiful, wonderful black women who stand up for other black women, because that's extremely important.
Absolutely.
And as I understand it, I hope I'm not misspeaking. I think you'll have an opportunity to talk and chat, you know, when we move into the other room. But I want to thank you so much for your discussion, for the great questions that you asked tonight. And MuteRKelly forever. That's it.